In November 2007, Nokia's CEO sat in a conference room and watched a video of a device his own engineers had warned him about for over a year. A touchscreen, no keyboard, an interface built entirely around apps. His engineers had built something almost identical 2 years earlier. He watched the video, turned to his team, and said it wasn't a real threat. Business customers would never give up their keyboards. That device was the iPhone. The company was Apple. 7 years later, Nokia's phone business, once worth over $250 billion, was sold to Microsoft for $7.2 billion. This isn't a story about a company that didn't see the future coming. It's a story about a company that built the future first and then talked themselves out of believing it. To understand how staggering Nokia's fall was, you have to understand what they were before it. In 1998, Nokia overtook Motorola to become the world's largest mobile phone manufacturer, a position they would hold for the next 13 years. By the mid-2000s, Nokia controlled nearly 40% of the entire global mobile phone market. 1 in every 2.5 phones sold on the planet was a Nokia. The company wasn't just big, it was a national symbol. Nokia represented roughly a quarter of Finland's entire stock market value and a significant share of the country's GDP and export revenue. Nokia phones were famous for being indestructible. The Nokia 3310 became a cultural icon, a phone you could drop, throw, or run over, and it would still work. But more importantly, Nokia wasn't just good at making phones. They were ahead of everyone, including Apple, on what phones could become. In 2004, 3 years before the iPhone launched, a team inside Nokia's research division built a touchscreen device with a full internet browser, a camera, and an interface based on tapping icons instead of pressing buttons. It was internally called the Nokia 7700 lineage, and parts of it evolved into a project that, by 2006, looked remarkably similar to what Apple would unveil a year later. Nokia's engineers weren't behind. If anything, they were early. The company held more touchscreen and mobile interface patents in the mid-2000s than almost any other company on Earth. So why didn't it ship? The answer lies in how Nokia was structured. By the mid-2000s, Nokia had become a company run by hardware engineers and operators, people who thought in terms of antennas, battery life, and manufacturing costs. Software was treated as something that ran on top of the hardware, never the other way around. Nokia's operating system, Symbian, was powerful but notoriously difficult to develop for. Building an app for Symbian could take months. Building one for the iPhone's iOS when it launched took days. Internal memos from this period, later revealed in interviews with former executives, describe a culture where touchscreen concepts were repeatedly shown to leadership and repeatedly shelved in favor of safer, keyboard-based models that were cheaper to manufacture and easier to sell to enterprise customers. The prototype that could have been the iPhone gathered dust in a lab. Meanwhile, Nokia kept shipping millions of units of phones that looked like 2003. When the iPhone launched in June 2007, Nokia's leadership genuinely believed it wasn't a threat, and for a moment, the numbers agreed with them. Nokia sold over 437 million phones that year. The iPhone sold 1.4 million. But the iPhone wasn't competing for the same customer Nokia had spent a decade serving. It was creating a new one. By the time Nokia understood this, they had already lost 2 more years. In 2008, Google launched Android, free, open source, and instantly adopted by every manufacturer who didn't have their own operating system. Samsung, HTC, Motorola, Nokia's old rivals, all became Android phones almost overnight. Nokia, still committed to Symbian, watched its smartphone market share collapse from over 50% in 2007 to under 15% by 2010. In 2011, Nokia made one final, desperate pivot, partnering with Microsoft to build phones on Windows Phone instead of Android. The new CEO, Stephen Elop, a former Microsoft executive, described Nokia's position in a leaked internal memo. Using a now famous metaphor, the company was standing on a burning platform. It was too late. Windows Phone never gained meaningful market share. Developers had already built their apps for iOS and Android. There was no reason to build a third version for a shrinking platform. By 2013, Nokia's mobile phone division, the business that had defined the company for over a decade and once employed over 130,000 people, was sold to Microsoft for $7.2 billion. For context, at its peak in 2007, Nokia's market capitalization was approximately $150 billion. The phone division alone had been valued at over $250 billion just a few years earlier. In less than 7 years, the company that invented the smartphone before Apple did ceased to exist as a phone company. The most common explanation for Nokia's collapse is that they were too slow, too bureaucratic, too stuck in the past. But that misses the more uncomfortable truth. Nokia wasn't behind, they were ahead, and chose not to act on it. This is a pattern that repeats across corporate history. The hardest threats to respond to aren't the ones you don't see coming. They're the ones you see clearly, build a solution for, and then talk yourselves out of shipping. Because the solution threatens the business model that's currently making you money. Nokia made its fortune selling durable, affordable hardware to as many people as possible. A touchscreen smartphone with an app ecosystem wasn't just a different product. It was a different business entirely, one built around software, services, and a tightly controlled ecosystem. Acting on their own research would have meant cannibalizing their own success years before anyone forced them to. Apple, by contrast, had almost nothing to lose in the phone market in 2007. They had no existing phone business to protect, no manufacturing relationships to preserve, no enterprise customers demanding keyboards. They could build the future without it costing them anything. Nokia could have built the same future. The prototypes prove it. What they couldn't do was justify destroying a business that, in 2007, was still the most successful phone company that had ever existed. Nokia still exists today, but not as a phone company. After selling its mobile division, the company rebuilt itself around network infrastructure and 5G technology, areas where it remains a global player. In a strange way, Nokia survived by becoming almost unrecognizable from the company that once made the world's phones. If you want to understand the decisions behind the rise and fall of the world's biggest companies, subscribe. There are new ones every week. And if today's story made you think about how companies make decisions under pressure, I've linked a book in the description. The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. It's the framework that explains not just Kodak and Nokia, but almost every major corporate collapse of the last 50 years. Link is below.